The rain had been falling since morning, steady and cold, tapping against the single-pane windows of Clara's cramped apartment. The sound should have been soothing, but instead, it only reminded her of the leak in the bathroom ceiling and the fact that she couldn't afford to have it fixed. A stack of envelopes lay scattered across the small kitchen table: gas bill, electricity bill, a half-crumpled grocery receipt, and on top of them, the one piece of paper she'd been trying not to look at all week, the eviction notice. She rubbed her temple and pulled the cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Her savings account was almost empty. Both of her part-time jobs barely covered food and transportation. Since Mark had left 3 months ago, taking half their furniture, and all his promises with him, she'd been drowning in expenses. Rent was due today, and she was short, painfully short. The knock at the door came sharp and precise, like someone tapping a gavel to announce judgment. Clara's chest tightened. She didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Mr. Dalton stood, bare in his usual pressed shirt and dark slacks, his brown hair neatly combed back. He had the kind of easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. In his hands, he held a leather-bound notebook and a folded umbrella, both perfectly dry despite the weather. "Clara," he greeted smoothly, stepping just inside without waiting for an invitation. "It's rent day." "I know," she said, voice quieter than she meant it to be. I don't have it all right now. I just need a little more time." Dalton's smile didn't fade, but there was something about the stillness in his posture that made her stomach turn. "Time," he repeated slowly, setting his notebook down on the counter. "That's always the most expensive thing to ask for." She swallowed. "I'll have it, I promise. Just not today." He glanced around her apartment, the chipped coffee table, the fading rug, the thrift store bookshelf half filled with mismatched paperbacks before turning back to her. "You know, there are other ways to handle situations like this." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" Dalton slipped his hands into his pockets. "I have a couple of friends coming over later this week, business associates. We're having dinner, good food, good wine. I think you'd enjoy it. And maybe if you came along, we could find a way to work something out." Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure if it was the way he said "work something out" or the deliberate pause before it. Either way, she knew there was more to his offer than just a free meal. "I don't think," she began, but he cut her off gently, still smiling. "No pressure," he said, reaching for his umbrella. "Just think about it. You wouldn't have to worry about rent this month." The door closed behind him with a soft click, but the weight of his words stayed in the air. Clara sank onto the couch, staring at the eviction notice. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rosa lit up the screen. "He came by, didn't he?" "Please, Clara, don't get involved with Dalton. He doesn't do favors for free." Clara typed out a reply, deleted it, and typed again. Finally, she sent back, "He invited me to dinner with his friends." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Rose's answer came quickly. "Don't go, Dot." Clara set the phone down and leaned back, closing her eyes. The rain hadn't stopped, and the sound was louder now, as if the world outside was trying to push her toward a decision she didn't want to make. She thought about the bills, about the extra shifts she couldn't get because the cafe was cutting hours, about the landlord's careful smile and the subtle way his gaze lingered. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Dalton this time, Thursday, 8 p.m. "I'll send you the address." She didn't respond. "Not right away." She stared at the glowing screen, the raindrops on the glass, and the reflection of herself in the dark, window-tired eyes. Messy hair, the cardigan slipping off one shoulder, 100 reasons to say no. And only one to say yes. She picked up the eviction notice, read the printed date one more time, and folded it neatly before sliding it into the kitchen drawer. The rain outside softened, but the knot in her chest did not. For the rest of the night, She tried to busy herself washing dishes, folding laundry, reheating leftover soup, but no matter what she did, the thought stayed with her. Maybe one. Dinner wouldn't hurt. When she finally went to bed, she left her phone on the nightstand. Dalton's last message still unread, but glowing faintly in the dark. Asterisk Thursday evening arrived faster than Clara expected. All day, she debated backing. Out sending a quick message to Dalton saying something had come up, avoiding whatever unspoken deal lingered behind his polite smile. But every time she looked at her nearly empty wallet, her resolve crumbled a little more. By the time the sun dipped low, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the glow of street lamps. Clara took a deep breath before stepping into the ride chair, her hands clasped in her lap the entire drive. Dalton's apartment building was nothing like hers. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and modern art framed on the walls. A doorman in a neat uniform greeted her by name, as if she were expected. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like it took hours, her stomach tightening with every passing second. When the doors opened, Dalton was waiting. He wore a dark blazer over a crisp shirt, his hair just as perfectly in place as before. "Clara," he said warmly, guiding her inside with a hand lightly placed at her back. "Glad you made it." His apartment was spacious, all clean lines, inexpensive details, soft lighting, an open floor plan, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of the city. The air smelled faintly of roasted garlic and something richer, like aged wine. 2 men were already there. Victor, tall and broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a gold watch that caught the light when he shook her hand. His smile was faint but measured, the kind that carried more calculation than friendliness. Evan, younger than Victor but older than Dalton, leaned casually against the counter with a drink in his hand. His eyes were sharp, tracking her movements without a single wasted glance. "Gentlemen, this is Clara," Dalton introduced. "She's a friend." Victor's handshake lingered a moment too long. "Pleasure," he said, his voice deep and smooth. Evan simply nodded but didn't look away. Dinner was served in the dining area, the table set with gleaming silverware and wine glasses already half filled. Clara sat between Dalton and Victor, with Evan across from her. The conversation started light, Victor asking about her work, Evan making an occasional comment about the weather or the city's rising rent prices. But as the meal went on, the undertone shifted. Dalton refilled her glass before she had the chance to decline. "So," he said, leaning back slightly, "Claire's been having a bit of a rough patch lately." Victor's eyes flickered with interest. "Is that so?" She forced a small smile. "Something like that. It happens," Victor replied. "Life throws its punches. But sometimes there are ways to make things easier." His gaze lingered on her in a way that made the meaning clear. Evan finally spoke again. "You live in one of Dalton's units, don't you?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Good location?" "Hard to find a place like that for a decent price these days," Evan said, his tone even. "Harder to keep one when you fall behind." Dalton glanced at her, the corners of his mouth curving just enough for her to notice. "That's why I thought it would be nice for Clara to meet you both. Maybe we could come to an arrangement." The words hung in the air, unspoken layers wrapped around them. Clara took a slow sip of her wine, trying to keep her expression neutral. "I believe in helping people who are cooperative," Victor said smoothly. "And I think you might be someone worth helping." The room felt warmer than before, the soft lighting casting longer shadows across the table. Every clink of a fork against a plate seemed louder, every glance more loaded. Clara kept telling herself she was imagining it, that maybe she was reading too much into their words. But Rose's warning replayed in her mind like a persistent echo. "He doesn't do favors for free." Dalton reached over and rested his hand lightly on hers. You want to stay in that apartment, don't you? Her throat felt dry despite the wine. She nodded slowly. Then maybe we should talk after dinner, Dalton said, his voice low. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. She barely tasted the food, barely heard the small talk that followed. Her focus kept drifting to the way Victor and Evan exchanged glances, the way Dalton seemed perfectly at ease, as if the night was unfolding exactly as planned. When dessert plates were cleared away, Dalton stood. Let's move to the balcony, he suggested, his tone casual. Victor moved ahead, opening the sliding glass door to the city lights beyond. Evan stayed behind, closing it softly once they were all outside. The hum of the city floated up from the streets below, mixing with the quiet murmur of their voices. Dalton leaned closer, his words just for her. No pressure, he said again, though the weight in his tone suggested otherwise. Clara's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Her heart was beating faster now, not from the wine, but from the knowledge that she was standing at the edge of a decision that would change more than just her rent situation. The night air on Dalton's balcony was cooler than inside, but it did little to steady Claire's thoughts. The view stretched endlessly, glass towers, glowing streets, the hum of a city that didn't care about her choices. Dalton stood close, his voice low, his presence filling the small space between them. Victor leaned on the railing, speaking to Evan in quiet tones, but every now and then his gaze shifted toward her. The weight of their attention made her feel exposed, as if the city below could see her too. Dalton swirled the wine in his glass before setting it on the small table. You know, he began, sometimes people make things harder on themselves than they have to. All you have to do is say yes. She turned to face him. Yes to what? His smile was faint but knowing. Yes to staying. Yes to making sure rent is never a problem again. Yes to being part of my circle. Her stomach nodded. And your friends? They're part of it too, Dalton replied evenly. We all look out for each other. Victor straightened from the railing and stepped closer. No one's forcing you, he said, though the way he looked at her suggested the opposite. But opportunities don't wait forever. The city's noise felt distant now, muffled under the pounding of her heartbeat. She thought of Rosa's warning, of the way her voice had sounded over the phone, firm, protective, certain. Don't go, but she was already here. Already halfway into something she didn't fully understand, but enough to know there would be no going back. Dalton's hand rested gently on her shoulder, his voice softer now. Clara, think about what this means for you. No more late notices, no more scrambling. You deserve comfort. The word lingered in the air, warm and dangerous. Her eyes moved to Victor, then Evan. Both waited in silence, their expressions unreadable. The tension wasn't in raised voices or demands. It was in the quiet, in the patience, in the certainty that she wouldn't walk away. She felt herself nod. Just once, slow, like the movement belonged to someone else. Dalton's smile deepened. Good, he said simply. The rest blurred. The glasses were refilled. The talk became quieter, closer. Hands rested where they hadn't before. The city lights shimmered through the glass as if casting their approval. Time lost its shape. She wasn't sure when she'd sat back down in the living room, or how the music had started playing in the background. She only knew that her thoughts had split into two, one that still wanted to pull away, and one that had already stepped over the line. Her mind kept flashing to her apartment, dim, cramped, the eviction notice still folded in the drawer. And now, the silent exchange in Dalton's glance told her that drawer would stay shut for as long as she played her part. It wasn't love. It wasn't kindness. It was a transaction dressed in politeness, wrapped in the soft glow of a high-rise apartment. When the night began winding down, Victor was the first to leave. He gave her a small nod, almost like an unspoken agreement had been signed. Evan followed, offering nothing more than a lingering glance. Dalton walked her to the door. His tone was calm, almost casual, as he said, "I'll take care of this. Month's rent. You won't have to worry." She nodded, unsure what to say. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, her hair slightly out of place, the faintest trace of flushed color on her cheeks. She didn't look like herself. The ride home was silent except for the low hum of the car's engine. Streetlights washed over her in intervals, each one flickering across her face like brief moments of clarity she didn't want to face. Back in her apartment, she didn't turn on the lights right away. The space felt different now, though nothing had changed except her. She walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the eviction notice. The date still stared back at her, sharp and final. Slowly, she folded it again, smaller this time, and tucked it behind a stack of takeout menus. Out of sight. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dalton. "Glad we understand each other." She set the phone down without replying. For a long moment, she stood by the window, looking out at the rain-slick street below. People passed by, lost in their own lives, none of them knowing what decisions had just been made in hers. The rent was paid. The roof over her head was safe, but the cost wasn't written on paper. It was something she'd carry quietly, like a debt that couldn't be cleared with money. She pulled the curtains closed, locking away the view of the city and the version of herself who might have said no. The rent was paid. But so was I.